Hey, everybody, welcome to the DBS Films Podcast. My name is Kellen. With me, as always, is my brother Brendan. Together, we make movies with DBS Films. Today's episode, we're going to go into tips on being an actor. And again, this is coming from us working with probably over 100 actors now. I have a little bit of experience when it comes to acting, not very well. But that being said, we basically want to give you guys a two-part episode in the idea of what it's like, what we're looking for, getting casting, working with on set, all of those things. So, as always, be sure to take a look at our Discord channel online because that's a place to be. If you want to be an actor in one of our movies, you can go ahead and be part of the community and audition for each and every movie that we are making from now until we stop making movies. So, as I mentioned kind of briefly as a caveat, we are not considered actors by trait. Usually when I am acting, it's typically with a masked man, or I had, my biggest role in The Haunting of the Murder House. And again, that is still a side character. I think the first thing I will mention is it is a very, very difficult trait to be an actor. I think a lot of people underestimate just how hard it is to be an actor, but I also believe that a lot of people overestimate, just kind of what is required to do it as well. As I think a lot of the things are under the surface almost when it comes to, just what your performance is on camera. There's a lot of factors that go into it. So really in this episode, I really wanted to cover just basically what we're looking for when it's coming to being an actor, working with us. So essentially the pre-production part of being an actor. And then in the next episode, we'll talk about post-production and more importantly, what you can do to ensure that you have the highest odds of basically coming back to set. So I think the first thing I really want to hop into, and I think this is the biggest issue with acting in general, is it really is a numbers game in the sense that there are a lot of people out there, very limited roles for it. But I think the first thing I kind of want to mention is a lot of times your acting isn't actually the most important thing when it comes to getting a role. It's almost kind of, are you fitting what that character is? And there's a lot of absolutely amazing performances that we get, but for one reason or the other, it doesn't fit that character you have in mind. And I think what I wanted to talk about is, as a writer, when you're creating these characters, you kind of make this fake mental image of what they potentially look like. And then when you are reviewing all of these auditions and acting and things like that, typically within those first few seconds, you either get a positive yes or a kind of a no when it comes to your reaction. Do you think that's kind of the case?
Yeah, I think it really is a numbers game. Just to give you a breakdown of the Into the Forest audition process, we had 7,000 auditions. Out of that 7,000, and this is just on Backstage. This isn't even what we had in our Discord. I believe we had 1,000 in the Discord as well. Just Backstage, I use that as an example. We had 7,000 auditions. I think I had maybe 250 callbacks. And this is just one-on-one meet and greets to just make sure people, the actors that I was working with, are cool, that they, understand the project, they understand what we are as an indie film company, and that they want to move forward and they, accept the role should they get it. So out of that 250, I think we knocked it down to maybe about 50. So you're looking at 250 people who could have done it, who could have, I could have picked any one of those 250 and gave them the part and they would have done a good job. 200 of them just maybe were just not a good fit for our production at the time. And then the last 50, it's just, at that point, it's almost like flipping a coin. All of them were very, very talented. All of them were very, very good. It just comes down to, like what Kel said, kind of what the look of the character and what I feel, in my gut that character should look like and the performance that they should give. And we're a little bit different when we write scripts. The roles, I'll always write them, with the sex in mind of the character, but it switches a lot. I've written, a lot of screenplays where the lead was a male, and then we held auditions, and the best person to get that role is a female, and we just slid the female in there. So there's no like bias into these scripts. And I think that's a little bit rare. But at the same time, the best person is going to get it. I don't care, whether you're male, you're female, or any, your race or anything like that. The best person is going to get the part. So it just comes down to being a numbers game at that point. And I think as an actor, it's the same thing with what we do with making movies. You just got to make as many as we possibly can. You got to be in as many auditions as you possibly can. With each one, your odds of, getting in a movie, getting in front of the camera increase dramatically.
Yeah, and I think it's good that you highlighted. I think we're very different from a lot of productions in the sense that going into it, being horror movies, things like that, it's always very flexible on our end of what kind of characters can cast for it. And I think what I mean more so is kind of that look that you have in the sense of you can naturally kind of lean into a character. Are they going to be the main character? Are they going to be, for instance, a Roger type character, where they're kind of more of, a taggy raggy type look to it when it comes to just scruff and things like that. Those are all the little things that go to the looks. But that being said, I think we do a really great job in the sense of basically having a wide variety with the net and the roles that we cast to really allow for a lot of different people to basically lean into those positions. And I think the next thing I want to talk about is, with us doing all of the auditions, we do a lot of auditions through the Discord. We had 1,300 auditions for the last movie, The Roger Files, that we did. And I think one of the biggest issues that I always run into, and this is one of the biggest issues I think everyone is going to run into, it's never that there's just one. I think what ends up happening is people think, oh, it is the best person that gets the role and that's what we're looking for. But it really comes down to such a minute difference between, the top picks. And I always feel like it's something when we do our callbacks, typically I have a callback of like 5 to 7 people, and each one of those 5 to 7 people can perfectly do the role. So if you don't get the role, that doesn't even mean you couldn't have been good for it. That just means you could have been slightly inched out from there. So you want to talk about how like painstaking it is kind of when you get that final group to actually pick one individual person?
Yeah, when we narrowed it down to 50 people, like I said before, any of those 50 could have done the movie, been in the part, and done a great job. They would have killed it 100%, no doubt in my mind. But what it just came down to was, when I talked to them on Zoom, who did I have a better fit for as far as like rapport, their ability to not break throughout the movie, and just like their general willingness to work on this project. I think a lot of actors think that, they have to do a good job acting, and that is 100% the case. You have to, be able to go in there and do the part. But the amount of time and effort that I spend trying to, flesh these characters out and see, whether or not they're going to break or they're a good fit for the project is just as important as the acting, if not more, especially coming from an indie film studio. Having somebody who's not a good fit with our cast, our crew, or has the opportunity to walk off should things start to get hard, could tank the whole production. So I think as an actor, you really have to make sure you're nailing these interviews as well. And that's what it is. It's an interview. So to give you an example, on our last project, Into the Forest, Andrew was one of the 50 callbacks for the character Bo, and he killed his interview. He did a great job on his interview, and I'll always remember, he just, at the end of it, I always say, do you have anything else you want to add? And he's just like, hey man, whatever it takes, whatever I need to do to get this project, I really like what you guys are doing, I really want to be a part of this, I'll do whatever it takes. And that's how he ended the Zoom call. And that's one of the reasons why we chose him. And we brought him on set, and he was absolutely fantastic. And that's kind of like what we're looking for. So I think it's twofold problem essentially for actors. It's just, you have to be able to act and, give the performance that the director is looking for, but you also have to be able to interview and connect to the cast, the crew, and the director, from a business perspective. And I think a lot of actors, the amount of actors that actually will pull themselves out of running for these projects by saying stupid things or things that just are not things they should be saying, is a lot. Like I said, we went from 250 down to 50 from people just kind of disqualifying themselves. So I do think that when you do get a callback, not only should you discuss the characters and have opinions on the character and ask a lot of questions about the project, but you have to be very careful. You still are interviewing. And a lot of the times, like Kel said, the difference between picking an actor can just come down to, I want the guy who's going to hustle more because we are a hustle studio. We're an underdog studio. And if I could get actors with the same kind of mentality, I think it's just a better fit for us. So I think, you have to kind of go into it as, making sure you can act and play the part, but also make sure you're interviewing to the best of your ability.
Yeah, I really think that is the case of, we mention it all the time of breaking, and to kind of get a detailed of what that is. These are hard shoots. These are shoots that we work typically 12, 14 hours, and it comes down to just consistently pushing it. I will say we've been getting better and better and better as we are developing. So these shoots are getting less and less intense. But we make these things very upfront and clear. And I think there's a dual edge here. If we say, hey, these are really hard work, this is going to be a lot. For the most part, no one's going to say, oh, no, that sounds terrible. Most people are going to reply, yes, I can do it. I can do the work and whatnot. So it is kind of those little details that we try and essentially sniff out there. I do want to, caveat another thing, because we talk with actors all the time, and we usually want to kind of get a gauge of what it's like to work with other projects. And as is in indie filmmaking, I don't think it's other filmmakers' intentions for this, but you can have a real train wreck of a set. You can have a set, whereas it being an actor or whatnot, it is just a completely unpleasant experience. It is something that is not fun. It is something that, you could be being taken for granted for. And when it comes to just kind of the way it works and just the little details, we always strive to put our actors first when it comes to just, providing them what they want, treating them correctly. So there is kind of a dual edge of like, as an actor, you do kind of want to be sussing out the studio a little bit too. And I think the biggest way to kind of suss people out is how many completed projects you have, just in the sense of if you're a brand new filmmaker, again, I don't think it's any filmmaker's intention to do this, but a lot of actors will put a lot of hard work into a product that never gets released. So I can kind of see where it does come from. But that being said, you still want to lean into it with your best foot forward, just going into these projects and mentioning things like, hey, I'm here for this. I'm ready to go ahead. I'm ready to go ahead and do, above and beyond. I think one of the biggest things is show up to your meetings on time. Don't miss these things. Like, you have very few moments when it comes to the selection period to kind of show that you have this work ethic for it. And if you screw up in any of these little details, those are something that ends up doing it. But I mean, I'll always say, anytime, I went through 1,300 of the video auditions for the last ones. Some of them included things that were like, hey, I just want to say I'm really excited about this project. I think this is really cool. I love what you guys are doing working with your community. Those are always little things that get me to perk up a little bit. So I think let's talk about kind of the audition process in the videos and things that we look for. I think more so than other studios, we kind of see past little technical flaws. Like I think at least on my end, are you recording with a backdrop or things like that, proper lighting? I don't really see that as much. But what I do see, and what I think is always something that you should try and do, is just kind of dressing for the part a bit. I work for, or I look at, we did a bunch of zombie roles. And for instance, some of the zombie roles that they went kind of all out with tattered rags and things like that. Irish had a whole setup that he went with when he came to his audition and he got cast for it. So I think anything you can do to show that you are looking at what the project is, that does help stand out. What's kind of your thoughts on just, little tips when it comes to that self audition tape?
Yeah, so you have to stand out. There's 7,000 people you're competing against. I do think, yes, we do look past technical stuff because obviously we're going to be shooting with nicer equipment, but you have to make sure you have a camera that at least can show your face in the proper color. I mean, we're getting pixelated stuff in there. If that's your if that's your video that you're submitting, it's just very difficult for me to watch this. I can't get a good look at you. Having good lighting is important, and it doesn't need to be anything technical. It just needs to be able to see your face and your reactions and everything. The amount of just dark videos that I get is ridiculous. And then sound, I just think if you're going to be doing auditions and you want to be an actor, get the $20 lav mic off Amazon that hooks up to your iPhone. It's a great investment and you'll have really good sound. That being said, it's not the end of the world if you don't have that, but it's a little thing that gives you a little bit more production value. I don't want to hear static. I don't want to really hear echoing. I think subconsciously it does kind of affect it a little bit, and it's $20. You can easily do all your self tapes with an iPhone or any kind of phone these days. Just spend the $20 to get the lav mic. But as far as dressing for the part, 100%. I mean, you're going to be competing with so many people. I love characters who kind of dress up for Into the Forest. It was kind of like a hiking movie. So we had a lot of people wearing backpacks or like little hiking hats and stuff like that. And it just allows you to stand out. And it shows that you kind of put in that little extra effort. And once again, we're looking for just that little extra effort that kind of separates you. So I definitely think that that is crucial. Ben for Shapeshifter did his entire audition in front of a fire pit because that was what this scene called for, is in front of a fire pit. And he just took that extra step, that little extra effort, so that, you know, in my mind, I'm like, well, if he, you know, will give it just 10 more minutes of just thought and preparation, I think that's a good thing. And a lot of the sides that we give are very vague. So it's always kind of cool to see the actors kind of look at it, kind of interpret it, and try and put themselves in the character or the situation. And all that stuff, even if it's just a couple of minutes, it goes so far to separate yourself from everyone else who's just shooting in plain clothes at the side of a wall. It's just very difficult to, you know, separate yourself. So I would definitely recommend it. If you can take a little bit of time, if you could dress up, if you could add just a little bit of flavor to stand out, I think your odds are actually going to be much more improved than someone who's just either doing a self-tape in a car or like in their bathroom or just in some random room.
Yeah, I mean, again, it is those little tiny details that can all add up to really assist you in kind of potentially getting this role. And, you know, that's critical. Again, you have to stand out between that many people. I think the next thing I kind of want to talk about is, you know, we're a bit different because we make so many movies. We're going to continue to make movies. But, you know, if you do get through to kind of like callback process or anything like that, another reason why you always want to put your best foot forward is because there's a good chance potentially that we might just reach out to say, hey, you weren't good for this role, but you might be a better fit for this role. And again, we're a lot different now when it comes to having our Discord community that we cast from. So, you know, most casting calls and whatnot, they'll never get back to you whatsoever. They'll only reach back out to you if you get the role. Other than that, you're just in dead silence. We typically, through their notifications, or if you get the callback level with us, we will reach out. I'll reach out directly and say, hey, unfortunately, we went some other direction. And honestly, these are very critical interactions, in my opinion. You know, I've had people who've responded, you know, pretty negatively, just in the sense of like, oh man, well, you know, I thought I would be really good. That's like a shame or whatnot in there. And it's like, okay, yeah, you know, I totally understand. It's something that does happen. But the counter of that is someone's like, oh, no problem. I totally understand. I'm excited to audition for the next one. You're showing your personality trait right there. You're showing that you're upbeat. And really, to me, if you're an actor and you can't take rejection, I don't think you've been acting long enough, because it really is a rejection game. So there's kind of different ways to see that. But I think another thing that, you know, I'm trying to mention here is every single time you do have an opportunity, you might stand out for different reasons. You know, every time we do casting, we always go through and there's usually 1, 2, or 3 people that will kind of be like, hey, this person would be good for X type of role that we're thinking about for another movie. So don't discount that element, especially with us. If you're auditioning for us, we literally keep track of everyone who's auditioning. We make notes for people who are auditioning because we really want to utilize what's in our community. You know, one of the things that happens is because we can see who's already acting auditioning, it gives us confidence to create different types of roles, because if we know we have X amount of people that could be good for this role, well, then we have a very strong confidence of being able to cast it. So you want to kind of talk about how you might have the ability to come back, and this is why it's also a benefit to just put that best foot forward, even if you don't get the role.
Yeah, you should always be upbeat. Like you said, it is a rejection game. You know, the odds of you getting a part in a role for our movie was 1 in 7,000. So it's, you know, it's, the odds are not in your favor. But what's in your favor is doing a lot of auditions and continually working on these projects. Everyone who gets a callback from myself gets added to a master casting sheet. It has notes, and sometimes there's just something in there that you're just not right for this role, or once again, like maybe my gut just went with another person. Sometimes I can't even explain why I make these decisions. Which is why, you know, I have Kel, and we send out auditions to other people when it gets down to the final last couple guys, just or guys and gals, just to make sure that, it's a kind of a unanimous decision. But everyone who is on that casting sheet, I always reach out to them first for the next audition and say, hey, here's a new role. We liked you in the last one, it just wasn't a good fit. Can you do it again? And we do cast and pull people who were rejected from another movie, just didn't make the cut, and we put them in a new movie. And this happens all the time. I would much rather cast from the Google Sheet than backstage, because with the Google Sheet, I've talked to you before and I've already vetted you out, and I already know that you're cool and that have the ability to work on our sets and you want to work on our sets. So then that just saves me time to go through 7,000 auditions and narrow them down to, the 5 or 6 roles. It takes almost 2 to 3 weeks, and it's just a lot of time. It's a lot of Zoom calls. It's much easier for me to just, fire up Excel and be like, hey, you weren't really the full fit for the last one, but I think you're a good fit for this one. Do you mind submitting a self-tape? And eventually that's my whole goal, is to just make sure that we can cast from the Google Sheet and we can cast from the Discord. So we don't have to have these crazy 7,000, 8,000 people auditions, because we don't have a casting director. We don't have somebody who's really going and weeding out all this stuff before these auditions get to me. I think the last one we had like 12 hours of footage of just auditions, and that's just insane amount of stuff to just watch through.
Yeah, it really is the case where it's such a numbers game against you. It's really such a hard process for this, in the sense of just, being able to just have that. You need a lot of things going for you. And that's why I think the next thing I really just kind of wanted to highlight, I get a lot of asking questions when we're doing different lives and things like that. What do you recommend as an actor? What would you do as an actor? And I think the biggest thing is you just have to do as many auditions as humanly possible. I think, again, this is kind of more general advice away from just our studio. For our studio, you kind of have the benefit of a community and a Discord channel. We have acting challenges that you can do. If you do the acting challenges, we get to see your acting as it progresses. You get direct feedback from us. So I think we really have established a completely different path of getting on board and working with us when it comes to movies, because every time you audition, it builds up, it builds your pedigree with us, as you were saying. Whereas most studios only make 1 movie, only make 2 movies. So it's kind of like, here, done, never see you again. So I think the biggest advice, and this is kind of the last big question for this episode, if you had a lot of advice for actors when it comes to just getting gigs, I think it's just playing the numbers game. It's just going out there, doing as many auditions as possible, backstage auditions. I would really try and audition for at least 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 things every single day that I could. And I would even audition for roles that, weren't quite as good, in the sense of, like, you don't think you might be a good fit or something like that for it, because I would just go for it to get the reps and to get the experience of doing it. And I think one person that, I really want to shout out and highlight for doing this is Stuart. So Stuart, he was Brad from Girl in Cabin 13. He came back recently on the Roger Files, but I'll never forget when Stuart was on set. He was there doing auditions for multiple things, not just films, not just movie, but for adverts, voiceovers. And I'll never forget, he was reading one for it was like the Hero's Journal or something like this. And I remember him reading that. I'm like, what is he doing down there? He's on set right now. He's still doing these auditions and whatnot. And then 2 months later, I'm scrolling through Instagram, and what do I see? I see Stuart talking about the Hero's Journal, which is like a planner or something like that. And there you go. He has a work ethic in doing these auditions, and it is the ability that he has to sustain it, not only through acting and things like that, but I think really as an actor, you got to treat it as a 9 to 5. If you were doing things from 9 to 5 every single day, that's going to be a lot of auditions that you can do. So do you have any, just tips or pointers on your end when it comes to just trying to get as much as you can?
I think what you need to realize is that this whole film industry is a numbers game. It's not just actors, it's everybody. We have writers who will submit scripts off to, agents and companies, and, the odds of them getting picked up are 1 in a million. So you have to send out 1 million scripts to even have a shot. It's the same thing on our end. I submit to 30 to 50 distribution companies every single time we have a new movie to try and find a good home for our movie. And just a lot of rejection in that as well. So it's everyone's working on a numbers game. And, our whole philosophy is we're going to make as many movies as possible because with each movie, we get better and we also increase our odds of getting either a better deal or having a breakout movie. As an actor, it should be the same thing. You should really be every day try and do a new audition, try and, submit a new role or, try and be in contact with a new production. And I would do want to highlight a lot of actors come to me and say, well, I don't have a demo reel, and that's what's holding me back. And I'll tell you what, I don't think I've ever looked at a demo reel because number one, that production could be completely different than my production. You could be working with really, really, really nice cameras, a really nice like soundstage crew and everything. And we're very run and gun. We do horror movies. So if you're doing like, romance stuff, it's not going to be a fit. I've never looked at a demo reel. It doesn't matter. What you can do is take all your auditions for all these roles and put them in Premiere and export them as one file. I do watch those. I would love to see you just go through all the emotions, all these different characters, and put that on your Backstage account because that's way more beneficial. But with each audition, with each rep that you take, not only will you get better, but you'll increase your chances for success. And when I hear actors say they've only done one audition every month and they're upset that they're not getting work, well, your whole problem is you're doing one a month. You should be trying to do as many of these as you possibly can every single day. Like Kel said, Stuart's going to be in Meth Gator, which just finished shooting here in Florida. And, he's doing a lot of stuff. The actors that are doing a lot of stuff are constantly auditioning. You can even go back, you can kind of look at the actors who have been in our stuff, what they're doing now, and their names just pop up constantly. They're always auditioning, whether for our stuff, for other stuff. It is a hustle. You have to treat it like a 9 to 5. If you don't have a gig right now, then, you got to be working double time to just get as many auditions out as possible.
Exactly that. And I think the actual last thing that popped into my head, because I think it is something that comes up often. And if I was in the actor's shoes and I really wanted to pursue it, nowadays it is pretty flexible when it comes to like the remote side of things. Like you can audition for things like that. But I do think there is a benefit in being in one of the hubs, which is going to be something like in Atlanta, Georgia, California, or even now like Louisiana, around New Orleans, is all of these tax credit areas. And I do think there is a big benefit in there because again, we will fly people out. And the main reason we fly people out for this is one, we, really do want to find like the best fit for the roles. But then two, it's something because we know within our community, if you're going through that community process that we have, you have much, much, much higher odds of being absolutely amazing to work with on set, which is something that, is super critical to our entire thing. But I'm just curious, would you recommend as well that if you really want to do have these chances, that one of the better ways is to go to one of the major hubs where they are consistently filming? And the reason I think that is because there's a lot of extra work and things like that you can really pick up just by being proactive. And, then it allows you to say things like, oh yeah, I was on the set of, X, Y, and Z movie. And like, I'll never forget, Tyler was showing us some of his clips that he had from a big Netflix series. I forget which one it was. It was something Blood or something like that. But it was a major production and there he was. And he basically was like, yeah, I got an extra role. They saw me. They said, hey, we want to bring you as like a featured extra. And those are all things that come from just putting yourself out there.
Yeah, I think networking for actors is absolutely huge. And I knew that directors and screenwriters and producers do a lot of networking, but actors need to be doing just as much. And being on different productions, no matter how small the part is huge. And we cast a lot of people that have been small little roles in our movies, maybe a couple lines here or there, no lines at all. And we bring them back because we're comfortable with them. But I can't tell you how many times when I pick a lead and I, give them the role, I say, hey, like we're still missing a couple other like roles, or, we got to fill in a couple other side characters. Do you know anyone that you would recommend? And that just comes from networking. And we've pulled people in that have been recommended to me, and we've put them in movies. So you have to be networking. You have to be hustling. All this stuff is important. And I think just being in a hub makes it so much easier. With Florida, there's just not a lot. We're probably the only production company in Florida that makes multiple movies a year. There's not a lot of stuff going on here. And if you're somewhere in Atlanta where they're filming just a ton of stuff constantly, you never know who you're going to run into. You never know who you're going to meet. I think that does increase your odds, especially if you can walk into an office and meet face to face. To me, that is huge. I would much rather meet someone face to face than via Zoom. But also, like, travel for some of these bigger productions does come into play. Flying people out can get expensive. Putting people up in hotels can be expensive. If you're sort of in the local area, then it's just easier for any kind of production to kind of, bring you on board. So I do think it is beneficial. I do think it helps. That being said, moving out to LA is very expensive, and you just got to make sure you have like all your ducks in a row to do it. But I think if you're going to try and make a giant leap and a stab at making this your career, then I think you actually pretty much have to be in one of these hubs.
Yeah, I really think that is the case. So that's going to go ahead and wrap up this first episode going into our tips on acting. Next episode, we're going to really talk about what it's like to be on set with us, what we recommend, and the best practices for that. As always, you want to be part of our acting process, you want to have a chance to be in our movies, all you got to do is download the Discord app, join our Discord channel, DBS Films, and you will have access to each and every movie audition that we have. And we look forward to seeing people out there listening to us right now. But until